Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here today on this very special day, and welcome to a conversation with Union alumni leading Fortune 500 companies on developing leaders for an uncertain tomorrow. What a great honor to be speaking along with President David Harris and our wonderful guests. I would like to welcome James Loree of Stanley Black Decker, Rich Templeton of Texas Instruments, and Devin Wenig of eBay. Before I introduce President Harris, I would like to share a story about my future boss, Jim. I interned at Stanley Black Decker this past summer in their world headquarters office in Connecticut. So I got to see the inspiration of Jim's leadership in the company and how respected and loved he is by everyone there. Before I worked there, Jim told me when I get exposed to the corporate world, it is going to change my perspective. I am a biomedical engineering student at Union College, and my past experiences has been at hospitals, so a completely different experience. And Jim was right. I indeed fell in love with the corporate world, and I was fortunate to be given an offer to go back and work with Stanley next year for the Leadership and Development Program. So thanks to the strong alumni network we have at Union and the strong alumni engagement, as we see here today, students like myself are given the chance to network, pursue great opportunities, and become better leaders. So thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. Allow me now to introduce President David Harris, who will be the moderator of the conversation today. I was the first year student to meet President David Harris when I served on the Presidential Search Committee last year. It was a great honor to see his transition during my last year at Union and work closely with him during the Board of Trustees meetings. Let me tell you that the Search Committee did an outstanding job. Thank you, President Harris, for excelling above and beyond the Search Committee's expectations. For those of you who don't know our President, Dr. David Harris is a sociologist with distinguished record as an innovative teacher, scholar, and administrator. Harris attended Northwestern University, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Human Development and Social Policy in 1991, and a PhD in Sociology in 1997. From 2003 to 2012, Harris worked at Cornell University as a sociology professor at first, and then became the founding director of Cornell's Institute of Social Sciences. Between 2010 to 2011, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Human Service Policy at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And before coming to Union, he was the Chief Academic Officer at Tufts University. Clearly, President Harris is a great leader, and we are fortunate to have him here at Union. Even in his first year as president, he has already brought many new initiatives. This includes pushing the Union committee to get out of their comfort zone to become comfortable being uncomfortable with the Union College Challenge. It also includes working on the strategic plan and holding town hall meetings to hear everyone's perspective, and starting a new speaker series to promote constructive engagement at Union. He also has been very involved in events that take place on campus and open to discussions with students during his office hours, and the list goes on. Without further ado, allow me to introduce President David Harris.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for everything you've been doing for Union College. Sarah was the first Union student I met, and just a great ambassador for the school, so thank you. I want to tell you a little bit about this event and where it came from, the idea. So when you become president of a college, they send you out to meet certain people, not a random group of people. And I had the opportunity to meet Rich Templeton. Went down to Texas, to Dallas, met Rich and his wife Mary, both Union alums, and was really excited to hear his story and started to think already about how could his story come and help our students, and also the perspectives he has as CEO, how could that be helpful to us as a school and to our current students thinking about their future. And I met James Loree, who's a member of the Board of Trustees. Very similar. He and his wife Rebecca, we went to a show and got to know them and think similarly, and met Devon Winnick as well. And there's this list that came out, and the list said, hey, where did Fortune 500 CEOs go to college? And Union College, the small liberal arts college with engineering in New York, had 3 people on the list. And so at that point I thought, this would be great. What if we could get all of them to New York City? It couldn't possibly happen that you could get these extremely busy people to come to New York City. And I failed at getting them to come to New York City. But we got them to come to Schenectady. On Steinmetz Day, nonetheless. Which is easier. And not only did they come here on Steinmetz Day, but there's a student here, and 2 of the CEOs were actually in his Steinmetz presentation today. So I did give him a heads up. So let me say a little bit about our guests, and then open the conversation with them, and then I'm going to turn it to all of you before too long. So Rich Templeton, to my immediate left, is class of '80. He's an engineering major here, electrical engineering. He's the CEO of Texas Instruments. He's been at Texas Instruments all of his career. He was CEO, he stepped back, and he stepped back into being CEO. So he's the long-serving CEO of Texas Instruments. And I don't think I've said this to you, but my daughter keeps wondering something that I bet a lot of these students wonder. Can you actually use those calculators if they give one to you?
Absolutely.
All right. You want me to ask that. So next is Devon Winnick from eBay. So Devon, undergraduate, was a political science major here at Union College, class of '88, CEO of eBay since 2015, I believe. And said, really excited. Devon's been traveling around a ton. I'm glad that he was able to fit this into his schedule as he was in Louisiana and D.C. and made a quick trip here on the way back to Northern California. And then Jim Loree, class of '80 as well. Jim was American Studies and then later graduated in economics, CEO of Stanley Black Decker since 2016, and has just been an incredible contributor on the board of trustees who work on the strategic plan. I have to keep reminding myself, Jim actually has a day job with the great memos and insights and so forth. So thanks to all of you for being here today. So let me start it off with really a simple question, a question many people might be wondering. So let's go back in time. You're 17, 18 years old. How did you end up at Union College? What led you to choose Union? I'm sure there's other places you could have gone. So why Union? Rich, you want to start?
Well, it had electrical engineering, it had sports, and it was within a couple hours of home, so it was convenient. Wasn't a lot more. If elegance is what you're looking for.
And were you thinking at that point, like, someday maybe I'd be the CEO of a major company?
I'd have taken the under on that bet.
Devin, how about you?
Similar. I was an athlete and I wanted to come up and play sports. I really appreciated the education, but the only thing different is there was somebody I met when I was recruited that made a big impact on my life. He ended up being somebody who I took his courses throughout, was my thesis advisor, and that was Professor Joe Board. And he was a very special guy who's no longer with us, but I met him when I was considering coming up, and I thought, wow, I'd like to spend some time with that guy. So that was a pretty seminal moment.
Excellent. Jim?
And I was a sophomore in high school, and my older sister was a student here, and I came up to visit and got to know the campus and a little bit about Union, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And I really didn't have a really great logic to my decision, but it was almost like familiarity, and it seemed to have everything I could possibly want, and so I came.
Excellent. So one of the things you always want to do is know I think lawyers try to know the answer to the question you're going to ask your client. And so in this case, I actually know the answers. So this is good about this one. How did Union prepare you to be a Fortune 500 CEO? The answer is not it didn't. That was what I would be worried about. I know the answer is it did. So, because what I hear from people sometimes is, well, if you want to have students interested in business, and they're not thinking about CEO, a student interested in business, well, we don't have a business school. I don't know if I can come to Union College. So how did it prepare you for where you are now?
You want to work this order?
Or either way. Either way.
I think in many ways, and it's the advertisement or the grounding that you've got at Union, which is you end up with applied knowledge in a liberal arts environment, so you come out knowing things as well as, more importantly, knowing how to learn. And you also forced us to take these liberal arts electives, which I thought was pure torture, only to find out after almost 40 years you spend more time communicating and talking to people, so maybe there was some method in the madness. Maybe. It didn't feel like it at the time, but it certainly made a big impact from that perspective.
Yeah, and we also talked about even outside the classroom, some of the leadership experiences you gained in maybe places we wouldn't expect it.
I think working is a great leadership development area, and I think the ability to work before you get to college, during college, intern opportunities, which I know you're spending time thinking about how to make that an even more central point to the campus experience, I think is really important because I think it builds the character that you're looking for the life.
Excellent. Thanks. Very good. Jim, would you skip around?
Sure.
How did it prepare you?
Yeah, so I spent my junior high school years and high school years very much an entrepreneur. It was all about work and creating value and little businesses, those types of things. Cutting lawns, delivering papers early on that morphed into a lawn cutting business, and then I got into working in restaurants. And at one point, I drove a taxi, and I was making a lot of money in those days, like $2, $3 an hour. But so, when I got to Union, what I really, really loved about Union was the interdisciplinary aspect of it, because I was really curious about everything that I did. And so I started American Studies, and I was going to be a lawyer, and then I realized what lawyers do, and I said, I don't really want to be a lawyer. And I moved over to economics, and that's where things clicked for me, because it was like money, I understood money, and I understood entrepreneurialism. And but I also branched out a little bit. I branched into computer science. I never got a minor or a dual major, but I learned a lot about computers and programming and binary logic and so forth, and that really turned me on. And then I also started getting deeply involved in creative writing. And I had a visiting professor from Harvard who was trying to convince me to become a writer. But I thought about the money and the future and all that, and I said, I think I might go into business. And so that's what I think the most important thing for me was about Union, was the inspiration to go do and the opportunity to go do all these things that you just couldn't do in a regular school, and the school encouraged it.
I think Union helped me become a happy, adjusted adult, and it happens to be that I became a CEO. And those are not the same things. I don't think necessarily the definition of success is being a CEO. If that's what you want to do, go do it. But I think in many ways it's the life experience that I had here, the educational diversity, the people diversity. If oftentimes you come to college out of you're in a community. You're with your parents. Your experience and your life is fairly sheltered. And then you come to school and you meet people that are very different. They have a different perspective. All of a sudden, you think you want to study political science, and you're studying engineering, and you're learning. And some of that creative chaos is, I think, the path to well-adjusted adulthood, whether or not you become a CEO or not. I think actually people that have more diversity in their lives, of their friends, of their experiences, of their education, tend to be able to deal with the real world better. And I think Union is unique in its preparation for that. It turns out that those are also good skills to be a CEO. I never thought, honestly, that I wanted to be a CEO. It wasn't my life plan. My life plan was to do something important that I was happy doing. It turns out that that's running a company that it's a privilege to run. And I do think that I could trace the foundation back to my experiences here. That level of horizontal education, that level of experience that I had never experienced growing up until I came here, really prepared me well to understand what I wanted to do and then to do it.
And one of the things I know that you've all talked about is the importance of other people you've connected with and so forth, and those relationships and sort of the vulnerabilities and support. And so you said that was a huge thing for you as well.
Undoubtedly. I still have great friends that I made here, and friends matter a lot. And, again, I learned a lot. I learned there were people that wanted to do very different things with their lives than I felt like I wanted to do with mine. And when you're close to them, you learn to respect that. And it actually makes you think about the world differently, and still does.
Yeah. So I didn't tell you I was going to ask this, but one of the things I think it's really important. It's not on there. Yeah. Sometimes the final includes the material that wasn't in the class. So here's the question. I love this question of extremely successful people, especially with students. Can you talk about a time you didn't succeed? Because sometimes I think students can look and say, look at you, you're 3 CEOs. I bet you had a linear path.
How long is that?
I mean, and what do you learn? What do you learn from that?
Well, to me, and there's a handful of words that I use to describe really important values, and competitiveness, values, and ethics, those types of things. But resiliency, to me, goes probably as high on that list. As you know, my wife got hurt 5-6 years ago, and it was just a perfect example of life is going to deal you, be it at work or be it personally, it's going to deal with setbacks. And you're not going to avoid them. Now the question is, you use them to get stronger, use them to get better. And I think that'll help you through professional environments. It'll help you personally. So I never think of them as setbacks when you hit them. It's opportunities to try to figure them out, and not make that same mistake again.
And I just say, Rich and his wife Mary, they gave a joint commencement address at SMU a few years ago. I think CNN said it was one of the best, if not the best, commencement address of the year. It's on YouTube, and I encourage you, for more on this topic, to take a peek later tonight.
I don't recommend that background to be able to have that material.
Absolutely.
But that's a different situation.
Absolutely. Is there something you think, yeah, it wasn't always linear?
I mean, look, one of the reasons the three of us love to do events like this is because it looks so beautiful from the stage. I mean, it's a hot mess getting to this stage, believe me. I couldn't agree with Rich more. The real world is tough. It's messy. And I come from a part of the country where there's a fallacy created that if you just have the one brilliant idea, it's all perfect. Go ask Zuck how that's gone. I think it's the real world is tough, and the truth is that success is persistence. Of course, you have to be smart. Of course, you have to care. Of course, you have to lead with great values. But the truth is that regardless of that, you're going to hit periods when it feels like the world is falling apart. That's the real world. That's being a human being. And actually what separates great leaders from not great leaders is how you deal with those moments. Everybody looks great and brilliant, and everybody's generous when everything is going awesome. You really do separate leadership when it's tough. And one of the most significant correlates to long-term success is the ability to get through that and lead through tough times. And there are plenty of examples. I don't need to go into my own, but I just say that that's the real world. And to Rich's point, if companies are good, if leaders are good, it's not rhetoric. They genuinely get better after a crisis because they learn and they adapt.
Excellent. Jim, anything to add?
Well, I think, I'll give you a more concrete example of where I think we get to persistence and resilience, where I think those are the themes that are coming out. But the Craftsman brand, a great American tool brand, and, we have a great American tool company, but we didn't have the Craftsman brand. And I always felt, the Craftsman was going to someday be part of our portfolio, and I pursued different ways because the Craftsman Mechanics Tools business was Stanley Works customer until 1991, and then we lost it to Danaher Corporation. Okay, and so I decided that when I came to Stanley in 1999, I was going to get the Craftsman brand business back, and I wanted to get the brand too, but I would have settled for the business. And so we tried for years and years and years different ways to try to get the business back, and then unsuccessfully, even up to the point where we offered to build a plant in the USA for Sears Holdings and invest $30 million in the plant, and and basically let them have a stake in it, and for some reason they just would not, go with us. So when Craftsman came up for sale in 2016, there were books sent out to over 100 potential buyers, and I realized at that time that the brand itself was going to be for sale, and we could lose hundreds, millions of dollars of business if it got into the hands of the wrong entity. And so we decided that the team decided that we were going to win that business. And what it took to do that, when we started out, it was we had a $400 million number that we thought we could pay, and Eddie Lampert from Sears thought that it was worth $1.9 billion. He had an appraisal for it. So that was the bid asked, and then we managed. I won't tell the whole story. We managed to get to a price of $900 million that he accepted, and then there was the whole idea: how do you get this through antitrust? And so then we had the whole, And so the point of all that is, you just have to play for the long term, and you have to be resilient, and you have to be persistent.
So this session is called "Developing Leaders for an Uncertain Tomorrow." I'm going to take a little bit of time and sort of take apart each of those sections. And the first one's leaders. So like I say, there's a lot of words that we use, and we think that what you mean by it is what other people mean by it. And sometimes you realize not so much. And so you were all leaders. I wonder if you might just talk a little bit about what is a leader? What does that mean to you? What are the key characteristics, key elements?
Sure. Well, I had the great opportunity to study leadership for about 20 years under Jack Welch at GE, but even better opportunity to see leadership at so many different leaders in GE, and the leadership traits that I thought were great and absolutely superb, and then other ones that you would want to not employ. And so being able to discern, and sort through all that's important, by the way. But, the way I view leadership is kind of setting out some form of a mission which is inspiring to people, and then figuring out how to influence the outcome of achieving that vision in whatever way you can with some constants. And those constants would be things like integrity, accountability, empathy, with people, authenticity, so the style that you convey to people is very important. And then there is the tone setting and the climate setting, that goes with that, and that's where you can really find ways to inspire people. And you don't always have people working directly for you, so it becomes a matter of how do you influence. I mean, today we work in ecosystems a lot in the technological world, and you need to bring along all these different partners and that type of thing, and you can tell them what to do, and that may not work. So you have to figure out ways to inspire them to follow you. And so I think it's also evolving. Today's leadership model is quite different than it was 20 or 30 years ago, although those constants are still there.
I think leadership and management are two very different things, and they get conflated often. Management to me is about direction, goal setting, and results. Leadership's something very different, and it's about inspiration. It's about getting the best out of people, and that's a very different thing. Management, you can look at it on an org chart. I manage you. It says it. You don't have a choice. Leadership implies followership, and that's not an org chart. And the one thing that I tell people on my team who aspire to lead is the one question that you need to ask, given what I just said, is why should anyone want to be led by me? I ask that all the time. Because it isn't an org chart issue, you have to ask, why should anyone want to follow that leader? Why should anyone want to be led by me? And there are a number of reasons that might be the case. It might be the case because you have a bold vision. It might be the case because people believe that you will develop them, that you're empathetic, that you have their best interest at case. But I think that's the important question to ask, and it's very hard to ask that question. It's very easy to ask why I'm managing. It's very hard to answer why I'm leading. And it's an absolutely critical question, and to be honest, if you're too comfortable in answering that question, you're probably not leading right.
I think Jim and Devin took the right place. When I describe it internally, if you want to spot your best future leaders, look for who builds best followership in a team setting or a team environment. And it's not the person that's making the most noise or putting their hand up or wanting to become the manager. It's who earns followership. And it's done very different ways, very different styles, but you can see what that looks like, and people that are good at that are usually going to be successful longer term.
So we were talking out the reception a little bit. Rich and Devin, there's a comment about leaders and how you think about, the extent to which look at me versus, a different reason you lead. I wonder if you might just share a little about that, and about also this interesting conversation about the extent to which what leadership does to you, as who you are and who you become. So share with the group. We're not at the reception anymore, so we'll share this.
You mean a version.
That's right.
I sit back and, as we chat a little bit, David, I think it comes down to a responsibility, an obligation. You are responsible for the livelihood, literally, of thousands of people, communities that you operate within. And, all of that inside of Texas Instruments goes back to almost everything begins and ends with these three ambitions. And first, we want to operate like owners that are going to own the company for decades. Second is we want to make sure that we can adapt and succeed in an ever-changing world. And third is we want to make sure we have a company that you can be personally proud of and proud to have as a neighbor. And you can take those three, and it now lets you make just about any business decision that you have to look at. And it lets you do it with great clarity and great belief of how you're building the place stronger. And I think Devin said it well. It's not the glory of sitting on stage. You will get more credit than you deserve. You'll get more blame than you deserve. But in the end, it's do you leave the place stronger? Okay, when you're done working there, or done with the community that you're within, or whatever that setting is, that investment to build things stronger, I think, is really the ambition you ought to have.
I mean, look, I genuinely believe it's an extraordinary privilege to lead the company that I lead. And when you're in these jobs, you have bad days, you have bad weeks, and it's really incumbent on you to look in the mirror and remember what a privilege it is, and say, shut up, you whiny, because it's a privilege. And if you forget that, you're not doing the job right. I really do feel like you're a steward for the values of the company. You're a steward for the community it represents. It's not all about you. It's a big company, and there's teams, and it's never all about you. But being the CEO implies a degree of stewardship. If you don't represent the values die. And if you ever forget that, then you shouldn't be running the company.
And one of the things we also talked about, it was just amplifies the person's characteristics. So if you get someone who's got some problems in middle management, make them the CEO, it's probably going to be worse.
Yeah, the amplification is amazing. The body language, that you send out, or the signals that you transmit, the things that you say. I mean, they go like that. But I just want to touch upon the responsibility of leadership a little bit in a company or a college that has the history that either Union College has in the 2 centuries of history, or Stanley Black Decker, which is 175 years old, has been through, it's now in the midst of its 4th industrial revolution, and how that responsibility it gets bigger, the more legacy you have. And in this world that we live in, the risks get higher as the pace of technological change accelerates, but the opportunities get higher too. And so, in this day and age, running a 200-year-old college, the responsibility is enormous, because the education system in every institution, frankly, in the world, is going to be just reshaped by these technological forces. And I think that the combination of having that long legacy that you've obviously, as an institution, we both, Stanley Black Decker, Union College, have both exhibited some resilience over the long period of time. And it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that continues, and that's an enormous responsibility.
And you're right into the second part, which is developing leaders for an uncertain tomorrow. So I picked the title, Uncertain Tomorrow. So it's not your responsibility, but it does come from conversations I've had with each of you and with many other people amongst our alumni community. And so I just wonder, when you think about this uncertain tomorrow, sort of how do you think about, you started talking about it, Jim, about this fourth industrial revolution and change. So I just wonder if you might talk a little bit about it. And I'd also say, Devin, after coming back from visiting you in January, I came back and said to my senior staff, I just came back from the future. Sort of being out in Northern California, the things that are happening and so forth, and talking to folks, it was like, all right, it's actually already happening and making me think differently about, where are we going and how do we help young people get ready. So your thoughts about future things.
Want to start?
Please.
No, you go ahead.
We're going to kill ourselves with politeness up here. I moved out to Silicon Valley 7 years ago, in large part because of an extraordinary opportunity to run one of the companies that defined the internet, but also because I wanted to be in Silicon Valley. And the reason is that in the job that I had before I joined eBay, I'd visit occasionally, and I'd come back filled with energy and excitement and confusion. And look, one of the things I've learned over the 7 years living there and really being part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem is you better get comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you're not, stand down. People try to control the world. This is not a controllable world. But it's an incredibly exciting world. And if you're comfortable with ambiguity and you're comfortable with creative disruption and you recognize that you should be making yourself uncomfortable constantly, disrupting your own business, disrupting your own thinking, if you embrace the uncertainty of the world rather than fight it, first of all, I think that's what makes successful organizations that transform themselves over time. But actually, life is more fun that way. It's exhausting trying to fight the world and make believe that some kid in a garage is not going to put us out of business. If you want to believe that, you can believe it, but it's pretty tiring because they are. If instead you want to say, that's the world, and let's create our own kids in garages and let's make our own mess rather than try to prevent it, I just think life is more fun and companies are more successful.
Excellent. Richard, jump in.
I go back to I guess the answer to is it an uncertain world? Sure, but it's a better world. And that, things are going to change, and what we have today is going to be different 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30. And if you ignore the headlines and CNN, it's probably going to be a better world. Okay, and if you go out, even spend today like we did around campus, which I do several times a year, you get energized by what you see coming out of some of these great classrooms in terms of what students are doing. And so I just look, I don't see, uncertainty, I see change. And to me, change is opportunity. And you embrace it, you welcome it. You're facing that same challenge running a college as we face as companies. It is not an easy thing to get teams gathered around that, but it really is, in some ways, your top responsibility to be able to do that well. So I'm really optimistic. I think it is a great world that we're heading into. I think it's going to be very exciting. It's very unpredictable what those outcomes will be, but if you're aggressive and competitive and you love change, you're going to do pretty well in it, is my guess.
So I'd like to talk about why I think the world is uncertain. I agree with Rich in the sense that I'm optimistic, but I want to also be realistic about a few things. And one is the inexorable pace of technological change, driven by something called Moore's Law and the increasing bandwidth of telecommunications, really all the things that Rich does in the chips. Increasing bandwidth of communications technology.
Why we're optimistic.
You should be very optimistic about your revenue anyway. But so, what used to, like, if you go back to the 80s or the 90s, things move in relative today very slowly. you could see things coming, gradually, and then as long as you prepared for them, you had plenty of time to prepare for them and absorb the change and exploit the change if you could. And today, things have sped up to the point where what used to take 10 years now takes 6 months or a year to change. Like an example would be like a couple of years ago, we were really focused on IoT and the connected world. And one day we woke up and AI was taking over the world, and tomorrow it'll be quantum computing or something. Who knows what exactly it'll be? But there's a whole array of things that are going to be coming at us, and the digital technologies or digital technology in general is affecting almost every technology across the technological spectrum, and effecting radical change in those technologies. And so we know that the pace of technological change is only going to get faster, and we also know that our ability as individuals to absorb that change is not all that great in general. Okay, there definitely are people who can do it, and some institutions are better than others, and they're learning organizations, and then society in general, really has an issue with it. And so, that's why you start to see some of this divisiveness in the world. And also, a side element of all this is the income inequality that is growing in the world. And so the reason I think it's so uncertain is because where do all those things collide? When does the ability of society to absorb all this change just go into overload? And I feel like we're starting to see some of the impact from that, as we look around the world.
So the last section, and I'm going to open it up to the folks here for questions. So, I'm reluctant. I usually don't like to ask alumni to tell me what to do as my job, but here we go. So, it's a partnership. We're not just preparing students for these 3 companies. We're not preparing all our students for a business career. But I do wonder, as you think about Union College, given all of what you've said, you think about higher ed, what do you think we ought to be doing? How should we be doing things differently from what we did when you were here, or your sense of the way we do things now in higher ed in general and Union? So
just starting out, I think first you've got the foundations of a working formula. Okay, that's been successful for a couple hundred years through a heck of a lot of change, and don't lose sight of that. And to me, that's knowledge and a liberal arts background and education, experience, teamwork, values, and everything that you can recite much more eloquently than I can. Does it have to be modernized? Does it have to be put in a current context? That you'll do a great job at that. So I think don't lose track of that. Don't overcomplicate the future. I tell people we'll have round tables with new college kids showing up, and they're like, well, do you think we're different than when you showed up at TI 40 years ago? I said, no. You want to work on exciting things, you care about the people you work with, and you care about the values and the ethics of the company. And does that sound familiar? And they're like, well, yeah. Now you have a few different hobbies that are a little different, but leave that aside. So I think that's, don't lose sight of that and make sure you get it modernized. I think the second part is, as an institution, as we've talked, I think the next 10 and 20 years are going to be pivotal, maybe 10 and 15, for higher ed in the U.S. And you know that, you know it well. And it is going to be about doing a better job getting people work ready, about being more financially responsible and accountable because of what's happening with trends and student debt and some of these opportunities. I think we've got a higher level debate in the country that that a 4-year college degree is not an answer for everybody, and we're going to have to get through that with time. But I think those are the things that have to be looked at.
I think you should build a strong technical track for non-technical majors. And I think the magic of liberal arts is that interdisciplinary education ends up being a force magnifier. You end up taking English literature and you don't know why, and 10 years later you know why. The thing missing, I think, is, this is a strong point of view of mine, I think everybody should learn to write code, regardless of whether you want to be an engineer or not. I think even if you want to go be an English professor, you should learn to write code. And the fact is that every industry, every business, and every profession is a technology profession or business, regardless of whether they're in the tech industry. And just like I could argue that you'll be a better computer engineer if you take English literature, I could argue that you'll be a better English professor if you take computer programming.
I'm going to talk about 3 axes of competition that not too many people talk about, or people are beginning to talk about in the strategy world. And one of them is competing on the rate of learning. So because of this absorptive capacity issue I was talking about earlier, it's necessary for people to learn at a more rapid rate and be more open-minded to learning, not only in college, but through their entire lifetime. And if you think about the generations of technology that are going to impact people in their 20s as they go through their 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on, they're going to have to be open to the entire lifetime of learning. The second one is competing on with ecosystems, and that goes to some of the leadership attributes that Devin was talking about. You're no longer controlling things. You're basically herding sheep. Trying to shepherd people and organizations to do what you want them to do without complete control, and sometimes without any control. And then the third one is competing on imagination, and somehow finding ways to increase the imaginative skills of people. And I think that a lot of that relates to diversity and making sure that we're emphasizing diversity of every type: cognitive diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, and being open-minded to the fact that not all people in those cohorts have the same needs and will benefit from having tailored solutions to welcome those people into the organization. I think if you think about those 3 axes of competition, and it doesn't just relate to business. It relates to almost anything that anybody might do post college in any profession. You will find ways, I think, with the strategy and with this institution to prepare individuals for a more successful lifetime.
Open up the last question. I remember, just to pick up, Devin, when we were talking at your headquarters, you were telling me about the kind of people you're hiring. And you might think it's eBay, where you're just hiring people who are CS types. But you were talking about some of the other types of skills and majors and so forth, you guys.
I'm just a passionate believer in inclusion and diversity, and it's not for the reason you would think. Yes, I believe it's important for society. I believe you can't build a great business without having diverse points of view, diverse people, diverse backgrounds. It's just not possible. And the world is moving so fast that the truth is that you're going to fail. You can have the smartest people in the world. If they're all white guys sitting in a boardroom in Silicon Valley, you're going to fail. And you've got to open yourself up to the top of the talent funnel, meaning we are a welcome place for people that have radically different perspectives, but not just then join, you can thrive here. And if you do that, your business is going to be better. Because particularly for a consumer business like us, we have 180 million customers. They sure all don't look like me. So you better have people that understand what a millennial woman who fashion shops spends her day doing, and every other type of consumer, or else you're just not going to get it right.
Excellent. Thanks. With that, let me open it up. Sure, there's lots of questions and thoughts out here. So let's turn back. Just identify yourself before you ask.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Blake Newcomer. I'm a sophomore here. Thank you for coming. There's been a recent push to rejuvenate the entrepreneurial club here by a group of students and faculty, because we believe that it's important for anyone that's trying to do anything to pursue creativity and innovation. And I was wondering if you guys could talk about how entrepreneurship has helped you get where you are, and innovation and creativity, stuff like that.
To me, I can still remember when I was just before graduating, and we, the electrical engineers, gathered, and you would describe where you're going to go. And at that time, John Kelly sitting up front, there were 3 places good electrical engineers would go. One would be IBM, one would be Digital Equipment, or third would be AT&T to get your master's. And I said, I'm going to Texas Instruments, and I'm going to go into sales. And the professor says, why are you wasting your education? I was like, oh, crap, what am I doing? And I did it for a very real reason, which is I wanted to know where the money came from, because customers are the only ones with any money. And, back to, I think, Jim, your remarks about growing up and what you did, that was the same thing we did growing up. You made money doing all types of things. That is a great way to learn. It gets called entrepreneurialism today, which is a more elegant title, but figure out where the customers are, figure out how to make money. And I don't mean from a self-indulgence point of view, just the puzzle of the challenge, and you will be well served by cracking that code.
You want to add, or?
You know what? You're my kind of guy. I'm the biggest failure in my family. My father was a founder of a biotech company. My brother left the financial industry to start his own business restoring cars, and my son just dropped out of college to run a tech company. I'm a massive failure running a big company. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, be an entrepreneur. It's actually, I think, one of the most noble things that you can do. Credit to you.
But you still have a chance, Devin.
Not dressed like this, I don't.
Well, I personally think you're onto something, and I really, in my heart of hearts, would hope and wish that it would go beyond the entrepreneurial club. I mean, that's great. That's a good start. But I think this institution could benefit from having a bigger commitment to entrepreneurialism, because, frankly, that's what one of the great things that motivates young people today, is because they see all this value being created in startup companies, and many of them want to have a shot at figuring out how to do that, and many of them want their education to help them take steps toward learning how to do that. And so I don't really have more than a thought on that right now, but I think it's something that this institution maybe ought to think about over time.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. You have the mic.
Yeah.
Your name?
My name is Devin Wenig. I'm a first year here. My question is, as representatives of corporations that are producing some of the mechanisms that are enabling the people in garages to put you out of business, does it feel like you're always playing catch up with them? Or do you find that as leaders of larger corporations that have a potentially greater influence on larger society, that you're able to take the wheel and drive it toward a collective goal? Or, again, is it always like you're playing catch up to those kids in the garages making you the next thing?
You're in Garage City.
I definitely feel like I have the wheel. I just wish it always felt like it was connected to something. I mean, look, you know what? It's hard being a big company, and it's hard being a small company. There are no excuses in the world. You got to innovate, and you got to disrupt yourself, whether you have 2 people in your company or 20,000. And small companies look at a big, successful company like eBay and say, I wish I was that, and everybody in my company says, I wish we had 2 people. So that's the real world.
Listen, back here. Oh, there you are, sir.
Hi, my name is Sahil Kular. I'm a senior here. Thank you so much for coming. It's an honor to be here with you guys today. My question is pretty simple, and I think I hope to get a diverse array of answers from you guys on it. How do the things that you do in your personal life make you better at your job?
Interesting.
I'm pretty simple on this thing, and that is that if you're not happy in your personal life, you're not going to do a very good job at work. And by the way, the opposite's true as well. And so, we'll have discussions inside TI about work-life balance. To me, it's not balance. I enjoy both. And, there were periods when the kids were growing up and I was coaching their teams, and it's on the calendar because you've got a, gym full of 5th graders for basketball practice. So you better be there. and you love doing it. So you've got to do both. You're the only one responsible for your own, quote, happiness, and companies can help you, but in the end, you've got control of that.
I wish I could offer up a diverse answer. However, I think some of you have seen my flock of 4 daughters and my beautiful wife, who is my inspiration, and just as evidenced by the fact that they're with me tonight. It's hard to separate the two, and it's really great to have happiness at home, and it just makes work so much more enjoyable, and frankly, me personally, so much more successful as a leader.
I think this idea of sort of hero work mentality, where you work 27 hours a day and you have no life, is total BS, right? Good leaders don't do that, and good companies don't do that. And the more you do to be a full human being, the better you are leading your company. I do what makes me happy. I don't think about it too much. I do things on the left and right side of my brain, and that probably makes me a better CEO. I write code in my personal time. I love contemporary art. I suffer with the Mets and the Jets. I'm a real human being. I do things, some of the things I like, some of the things I don't, but, live your life.
Back? Oh, the microphone's here. Sorry, go ahead.
I guess I won. So I apologize for the mess in the Jets. Patriots and Red Sox are like
Somebody take his mic.
Quick name?
So I'm Troy Hanson. I'm a senior here at Union. And if each of you guys could go back and give yourselves one piece of advice when you were graduating college, or when you were a freshman in college, what would you guys tell yourselves, 20, 30 years ago?
If we were wiser?
Right now.
Jim, you're breathing deep.
That's what when I think deeply. But so let me say that when I was in college, I really, you heard about all the different things I studied. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, although I kind of knew I wanted to do something and create value. And so, but I graduated with, I had 2 interviews. One was selling life insurance, which I would have been terrible at, and one was working for General Electric in their training program. And so I didn't really know if that was going to be leading to anything that I would enjoy. But, and it was kind of out of my comfort zone, but I did it anyway. And I was comfortable with, just taking that shot and really working hard and being successful at that. And then the entire time in the corporation, in General Electric and in Stanley Black Decker, I always did everything I possibly could to create value for the corporation. And when you do that, you really do end up getting rewarded over time, because the people that create the most value, and it's not just financial value, but also community value, social value, team value. You really do. That's how you rise up in an organization.
Don't bother having a detailed career plan. I've never known a single person in my entire life whose career plan worked out the way they thought it would be. Don't read business books. They're a waste of time, other than the ones that you have to read for your curricula. Read those. But, the theme of both of those is be passionate, do what you love to do, don't overstress it, be selfless, and things tend to work out.
Cannot top it.
Excellent. Thanks.
I'm Mark Perlman. I'm a senior, and the future may be uncertain, but one way that we can better navigate it is by looking at the growing trends of today. And something that you guys mentioned is AI. We all know that it's going to start to automate more and more jobs, and that's really scary coming right out of college. So as leaders, in what ways are you motivating, inspiring, or retraining your workforce to make sure that they are constantly motivated?
You know, I'll start. It's not to be controversial, but I think that's crazy. Okay, and what I mean by that is automation of any kind. You can go back, look at the history books, okay, and go through Luddites and whatever example you want to pull from the past. And you know what? In the late 1800s, 80% of the U.S. economy was agricultural, and 40 years later, it's manufacturing. And yes, that period of transition was hard, but it was opportunity and growth. And I think we're going to see the same thing happens as we go through, quote, AI or big data or whatever label you want to put on that. The opportunities to grow, the opportunities to get stronger are actually greater than the threats. And I'm not ignorant to the dislocations. You have to help people or teams or communities when you go through those, but we'll be far better served if we're focused on what the growth is and what the opportunity is.
Yeah, I think it's one part. It's one part practical reality for us as business leaders, and one part commitment to social responsibility. That when these technologies come in and upend, you know, the skill sets of our workforces, we have to figure out, it's a practical issue. I mean, we have to figure out how to retrain those folks and reskill them to the extent possible. Not everybody will be able to get there, and we'll have to treat them really well as you know, they become their skills become obsolete. But we're going to have to make sure that we retain enough of our workforce and reskill them and take the responsibility as a corporation. And what we're doing is we're working with academia, governments, and our fellow companies, and we have a couple projects around the country right now as pilots, but we're working very, very intensively with Connecticut because we have a lot of people in Connecticut, and there's a lot of retraining that needs to be done because advanced manufacturing is coming in faster into Connecticut than it is many other regions because of the aerospace and defense industry. So we just have to partner up with public-private partnerships, figure out how to retrain the workforce, and take some responsibility for making sure that we do that for practical reasons and for our commitment to social responsibility.
Yeah, you know, there was sort of a bit of heaviness to your question. It was sort of like, look, we're going to all make good pets to our robot overlords, so what's the point? That's the world we build is our choice, right? I think humanity is for humans, and it's actually more your choice than the three of us on stage, right? Like, we're about to, at some point, turn the reins over, and then it's your time. And it's not at all inevitable. I'm a passionate believer in disruptive technology. I'm a passionate believer that things are going to be even more wild than you think. But thinking that that means a subjugation of humanity, or in some ways that we lose our humanness, that would be an awful future, and that's not at all inevitable. And actually, I think we can build a more human and connected planet, and why don't we do that? So why don't you go do that? Instead of saying, you know, oh God, it's all stacked against us, go figure out how that incredibly interesting and disruptive technology makes us more human, not less human.
Hello. Hi guys.
Where are we looking?
Over here. My name is Untitled Chapter. I'm a biomedical engineering senior here. I love the topics and questions, by the way. It's awesome. One thing I've been noticing a lot in media and in conversations I have with other millennials is that we think that we're like the harbingers of peace and we're going to solve everything. And then a lot of other people think that, you know, we're the bad kids, or that we may not be as great in the workforce due to maybe general habits. Maybe with your guys' perspectives and times working with millennials, are there general things that we should keep in mind as we take our first steps into the working world? And if millennials themselves do have things that we should take into account as we continue to grow?
Okay, well, my experience is, you know, first of all, more than 50% of our workforce is millennials, so it's a really important thing to make sure you understand. I think millennials need purpose, more so than perhaps previous generations. Millennials need to be inspired. They don't just, come to work like the baby boomers, ready to do whatever they have to do to get ahead. That's not necessarily as important to them. And they care about social impact. And what they want to be doing something that has social impact. Now, that's a gross generalization, but I'm talking directionally, okay? And so I think it's really important for companies to make sure that they convey a purpose to individuals that are in their workforce and as a company in the whole, and also that they enable and allow and encourage all employees to be able to have a social impact either individually or in teams or as part of the total corporation's efforts.
Millennials. Devin, you probably have a couple.
Yeah, we have a lot. I wasn't clear whether the question is what we should do as companies or what you should do as somebody entering the workforce. Was it more about what you should do?
Sorry, it was more about how we should approach our first steps.
I think probably every generation feels radically different. It's probably not. And my best advice is just don't be entitled. Go work hard. Be humble. It'll work out. Don't be entitled.
I saw Alex over here too, so we can get the mic up here after this way, the corner, and then it's hard being back here.
So the question.
Go ahead. Yep, here in the corner first, and then here.
I'm standing up as a dad, so I know a lot of you kids in the room have had college graduates. I've got a senior here next to me, and I've got that business. It's under 20,000 employees, and I have had the interns in the office. They all seem so worried about what they're doing for a job or where they're going to land or what's going to happen. And I'd just like all of you to kind of speak to the fact that don't be so concerned. You got to start somewhere. You have to try something. I think you're all going to that theme. But don't be so worried that it's not the best paying job right away. I've had all these interns and I think about it every night. They all seem so worried. That it's not the perfect start, and I think you guys can speak to that, and please, help everyone understand. Don't worry, just start somewhere, and things will happen.
Great question and answer.
I might just add, though, that one of the things I share with students is I like to think about when I'm talking with students sometimes, I feel like it's as if they're ordering something at a restaurant, and it's like you're only going to get one chance to order. What are you going to order? And you might ask, hey, do you offer samples at this restaurant before I order? And often they might say yes. You can sample whatever it is, and then you know. And I feel like that's what it is with folks in general. And I think that's what I hear you guys saying is, get out there, start something, try it, and see if it works. If it does, continue. If not, try something else. Alex?
Thank you for the parents. My name is Alex House, and actually something really, so as Sarah mentioned, since President Harris has come to the school, he's tried to increase the constructive engagement that has been happening on campus. I was wondering, while you guys were at Union, did you experience constructive engagement, and how in your life has constructive engagement impacted your leadership?
Maybe I might say what I mean by it, or just quickly, is sort of being uncomfortable with a range of perspectives, finding ways to engage ideas that are maybe not yours, and people have different ideas, but do it in such a way where the approach is understanding rather than combative and getting them to see the light, because you know it all.
Well, from our perspective, it's all about culture building, and you have to have a culture that has an open-mindedness to it. And really supports diversity and inclusion. So it's not just diversity, but it's also inclusion. And if you have an environment that supports and encourages diversity and inclusion, then constructive engagement is a very natural act.
If your question was constructive engagement back in the late 70s when I graduated, I was busy trying to get done and get to work. I hate to sound so focused on that, but it really was in some ways a different time in terms of what debates were going on. But don't underestimate and you've got people that either were going to college in the 60s or 70s. There were forms of civil unrest that make today look really peaceful. And so let's not, it's a different time and there's different tools, and you've got different vehicles like Facebook updating things, by the nanosecond. But, if you show respect to people and respect to ideas, you'll get a long way. And I still think that's the basis that gets missed as these arguments get rolling these days.
Okay. Nothing to add.
Excellent.
Absolutely right.
Oh, Carl. Oh, let's see.
Thank you. I'm Carl George. I've been around here for about 50 years plus, and I suspect, towards my point, that I'm one of the oldest, if not the oldest person in this room. And so that speaks to the question of aging in America. The diversity concept, I noticed you all used other words, but we didn't say anything about age as diversity and fostering them in terms of community. That's one of the things that I've worked hard at over these 50 years, and that is not just diversity, but bringing the diverse people together, communicating, sitting across the table in mixed sessions, and making the world a better place. And so my question for you, gentlemen, is how are you thinking about the increasing age issue in America, where we are stockpiling thousands and thousands of people in buildings, in wheelchairs, in a rather strange and unhappy way. So what are your issues regarding us older folks?
Aging in your models.
Who's going to grab it? We have a volunteer.
The first thing I would say is I hope I personally get the opportunity to go through that. So the alternative is not desirable, right? So congratulations on getting to that point, and I hope we all do. But it is a real issue, a series of issues, no doubt about it. We just moved my 86-year-old parents into the house next door and are trying to keep them independently living, and there's enormous challenges associated with it. But I think the answer in this personal case is that my wife Rebecca and I we're taking responsibility for doing that, and they need help, but they're also we take them out to dinner every week and those wonderful little children, and they cheer them up like beyond anybody's imagination, and we just keep trying to do the best thing we can do for them, and I think the more that you can find with aging companionship and constructive companionship, I think it just makes an enormous difference.
First of all, I applaud you for raising the issue. It's fantastic. You're a champion for the issue. I don't have an easy answer. I'm not an expert on it. But one of the things that I will say is I have seen constructive ways that technology has helped connect and invigorate people of age. It can get isolating. And I do think training on technology for people that are seniors in the right way can be a wonderful experience. I know plenty of people. My mom uses social networks to connect with her extended family, even when it's not easy for her to be with them in person. And that gives her a lot of joy, and it gives her a purpose in life. So I hope that technology, to the point before, it's very easy to paint gloom and doom and negative scenarios about technology. I think seniors and the ability to connect and stay vibrant is a great positive use case of the advancement of technology.
Yeah, I think following on Dev's last one, it's not only just uses of it, but think about the medical applications that can be done to improve quality of life. I think there are a lot of evolutions that are going to continue that are going to be very impactful, and it happens slowly, but I think we'll be very impressed over the next 50 years.
Getting closer to it, but yeah, Sarah?
Hi, thank you so much. Sarah Hunches. I graduated in 2004. I work for a tech company as well. It's eBay, but pretty exciting. And actually, my question, as impressive as you all are, isn't for the panel. It is for Alex, who asked the question earlier. Alex, you were the only woman out of all of the questions that
I agree.
To step forward and ask a question, and I'm very proud of you for that. And I wanted to know if you have plans for the summer, if you like an internship we would like to have.
Don't answer until you talk to me.
And talk to Sarah about our culture.
Thank you, Sarah. I noticed this as well. Excellent. Thanks. Yeah.
Corey Ruffin, I'm a sophomore. It's hard to top that. But David Axelrod, who was an advisor to President Obama, once said running for president is a lot like being an astronaut. You can't know until you're actually doing it. So not that none of you are astronauts, but becoming a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, the chairman of the board calls you, you're going to be the CEO. What do you do to prepare? What are the surprises? What are you shocked about? How is it different?
I think we talked about it before, and if you listen to a lot of the evolution, it was moving from, the leadership or the management, which everybody talks about, to the leadership, which is really about the followership. And, I think to me, when I meet even, folks that take on much larger responsibilities inside of the company, or you meet new CEOs, they've spent their career growing up thinking they had to speak up and talk louder to be heard. And what you're about to find out, if you become either a senior leader or a CEO, you better be really careful about what you say, because everybody's listening. And they'll be interpreting it in ways that you will be surprised by. And you want to just sit back and say, yeah, but you guys know me. Well, 30,000 people, or whatever the number is, they don't know you. And so that ability to really let them to get to know you is a very important thing in what little ways that you can, because you will not build great followership if they don't believe in what they're part of and who they're part of and who they're following.
It's a very unique job and a very unique existence. CEOs tend to find each other and become friends because there's a bit of a peer, like, holy shit, do you believe, are you going through this too, like I am? It is an incredible privilege. It's also an incredibly hard job. One of the things you learn is if you're in any role other than the CEO, you think, well, I'm managing a huge organization, I get it. That job, you sort of, from the moment you have that job, you look around and you're like, where is everybody? Oh, you're alone. It's you. You're accountable. Well, but the economy, but this. Nobody cares. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It is an extraordinary privilege. It really is. I would not want to do anything other than what I'm doing. But it is a bit of a surreal existence. It can be.
Jim, anything to add?
I think they've covered it quite well.
Okay.
The surreal existence part especially.
We have a question from a recent graduate, perhaps.
Hi, I'm Julianne. I'm one of the flock of children. My dad, but he does not know I'm asking this. So I noticed the same thing that Sarah did with Alex being one of the only women to ask a question. And my question is now for the panelists. What advice can you give to the young women in the room so that when this event is done in another decade or so, that we do have female representation on the stage? And then the other thing is, what are you doing in your own company to empower women?
Union class of 18, right?
Dad, do you want to start with that?
It may have been directed.
I'll buy him a little bit of time. I think in many ways the comments you've heard about get going and make an impact, and it applies just as much. Don't try to outthink it. Don't let it get too complex. And, we find it applies just as much. The biggest thing that we've been doing over the past, in some ways, 15 years, we've made great progress in a lot of what we'd call the functional roles. So think of IT and finance and a lot of those areas. What we're trying to get more progress on is some of the business unit and more of the, quote, power positions. And we've had to debunk myths. Okay, the myth, well, you're working 24/7 and traveling at a moment's notice. No, you're not. You can raise a family and have kids and do all those things and make it work. And by having, now we're fortunate that you start to have women in higher level positions that, women that are joining the company actually have places to go to ask those questions. So it's no longer someone else that has to tell them. So we've made good progress, but keep driving away. We believe in it greatly. Look at the diversity of our board. Look at the diversity of our senior management team. We think we're better today than we were 10 years and 20 years ago, and we're committed to be better 10 years from now.
My advice for women would be don't stifle your own voice. There has been a lot of really interesting research that one of the things, particularly in the tech industry, that limits the pool as seniority grows is that women regulate themselves, and that's a shame, and that shouldn't happen. Sheryl Sandberg speaks about this all the time. Don't be shy. Don't ask for what you deserve. It's really interesting. Again, the research says men ask for raises more than women do. It shouldn't be that way. There's a big difference between asking in a way that is not appropriate for men or women and regulating yourself out of seniority or roles. Never do that. With regard to our company, this has been one of the most significant priorities for me since I took over as CEO 4 years ago. I don't want to go down a whole thing, but I think that oftentimes diversity ends up being about numbers, and it's more than that. We think about it as the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace. So it's about the environment at work when you work for us, meaning people authentically believe they can be their best selves. It's not just about they're an employee. It's, are they an employee who doesn't believe they have to leave their true self behind? Because when they do, they leave and they don't grow. It's about the workforce. Numbers do matter. So by saying it's not only about the numbers doesn't mean it's not about numbers. And growing not just gender diversity, but all forms of diversity is important. And then it's about the marketplace. It's actually about your business as well. And we think in terms of enabling entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs who are women. How many businesses that sell on eBay are women or people of color? That matters as well. So it's all the above.
Jim? We're doing a lot. And I, in particular, as a leader of the company that took over 3 years ago, have made redoubled those efforts. And there's a long list of things that we're doing, and a big part of it is changing the culture. So the tool business, the tool industry, is historically a very macho, kind of a culture, and we are doing everything we can to make women feel comfortable and give women opportunity, and actually going above and beyond, just putting them in the system and letting the system, grind out whatever result, happens. We have formed a women's network that has thousands of women in it across the company now. I meet with them periodically, and we talk about what is it about this company that women struggle with? What can we do to help deal with some of those issues? And they come down to things like workforce flexibility, and if they're in the child rearing years, how do you accommodate their ability to have children and still keep them in the workforce and active in some way, and then welcome them back when they're ready to come back if they actually leave the workforce. And so there's all sorts of things we're doing there. But I think in the end it's just, you really have to, and this gets to the authenticity of your belief in, and the company's belief in diversity and inclusion. If you really believe in it, it has all sorts of extra benefits in the sense that you can accelerate progress. And I really believe in it, and one of the things that I'm doing personally is two things. One, we have this commitment at the top. We have female leaders we've hired that are brilliant, leaders recently, and we have a lot of women, coming at the entry level of the organization. In the middle of the organization, we have we call it sometimes the bottleneck in the middle, where the people in the middle don't understand, what we're trying to do, and we can't seem to get them, the message down fast enough or, effectively enough. And so we're working on a lot of communication strategies to do that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I personally have identified 30 women who I think, have the potential to jump 2 levels in the organization, and in some cases be a CEO succession candidate if afforded the proper development in the next couple of years. And I am working with a senior management team for each one of those women to come up with a detailed strategy for how we can provide them with the experience over the next few years to see if they can actually achieve their full potential. And I think those are the kinds of things you really just have to do go a little extra mile here, and make sure that you provide them with the opportunity above and beyond what they otherwise would get in order to accelerate progress.
Excellent. So I will also just say that the world is changing in lots of ways. So just as one indicator of it, Fortune 500 CEOs is not as diverse a group yet, but if you look at college presidents, I went to a meeting at the Mellon Foundation, and it was for new college presidents. They were all top 50 liberal arts colleges. It was 7 women and me. So the world is changing. I want to thank you for coming here. So one of the things that when I think about being president of Union College here as I come towards the end of my first year, I think about what I'm proud of. And I'm proud of our history. I am proud of the physical beauty of this place. I am proud of our range of academic programs. But I'm proud nothing more than our people and our culture. And today was a great opportunity to showcase the people and the culture for these alumni who got to come and see it and go back to some of their old haunts and come to Steinmetz and so forth. But it was also a great opportunity, and I thank you so much for arranging your schedules to make it possible so that the students, faculty, staff, community members, parents here could get to hear from you. So thank you.
David, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.